usually there's a book. You look through the book and you find pictures of the pattern that you want, and then you find the pattern number, and then usually there's like drawers or shelves or something, and you can go, you can take the pattern number and go find the actual packaging. The next thing is the size. This one has weird sizing. It says size U. I don't know what size dress the size U is, but then it says next to it, I know it's really tiny, it says 16, 18, 20. So this particular pattern has sizes 16, 18, and 20 inside of it. And I don't know if you can see in the back because it's at the bottom, but next to each picture there's a letter. So this uses A, B, and C. These are the 3 different styles of dress that are inside pattern packaging. And if you flip it over, it looks super, super complicated, but don't panic. That entire half is in French. Some patterns, they'll only be in English, or they'll have, they'll have English and then like a Spanish translation underneath. So they're a little less intimidating, but this particular one, half is in French. So you have pattern number up at the top again, and then over on the side, this is the back view of the pictures that are on the front. This one is a little bit different than some of the other ones I've seen in that, hopefully you guys can see. B is right here on the same picture as C, because B is just a shorter length. I don't know if you can see that line right there. And then this is the back of A. And I'm going to take you step by step. I'm not going to read you the whole entire thing because that would take forever. But I'm going to take you step by step through what each of these little sections is. I'm going to do that. So up at the top, it tells you, there's a brief description of what the pattern is for. So since for a dress or jumper, it talks about the seaming and how it fits and how long it is. And then it tells you recommended fabrics and not recommended fabrics down here. Because I'm not going to read the whole thing because it really doesn't matter. And then it tells you what notions you need. So notions are, like it says, thread, zippers, hooks and eyes. This one says look for simplicity notions because of course they want to plug their own merchandise. But also if you have a simplicity pattern, it's very likely that the notions will match up to the measurements that you need. So the next section is measurements. And so, oh, yes?
What exactly is a notion?
Like I said, it's things like zippers, hooks and eyes. It's like hardware. Like hardware that you need to put on to your garment to make it actually fit on you.
That you probably couldn't make yourself from scratch.
Yeah, that's a good point. So next section is measurements, and it looks more complicated than it is. I'll show you in a second also. There's a list of measurements that if you sew very frequently, you should have for yourself pretty much all the time, and I have copies of it too. I didn't bring enough copies because I seriously expected like 10 people to show up. So there were like 10 copies. But so normally if you have your list of measurements, or if you take the measurements before you start, usually I go off the biggest or most extreme measurements. So let's say I really need this dress to fit around the waist. My waist is about 24 or 25, so you go across, and then you go straight down, and it'll tell you what size you need. So this is why it's really important to read the package before you buy the pattern, because each package, each pattern can come in a huge variety of sizes, but each package will only have like 3 sizes. I think the most I've seen in one package is 4. So yeah, you can see, you just go across and then you go down and find your sizing. This also tells you how much fabric you need. So this is where you reference the front or the back photos. And you can see, so if you want to make, dress A and your size 10, then you'll need 3 3/8 yards of fabric, or round up to 3.5. And then same thing, so it'll tell you, one more thing. This is, when you buy a bolt of fabric, which I forgot to bring mine, it has a certain width. So if the width is 45 inches, then you'll need 3 3/8 yards, but if the width of the bolt of fabric is 60 inches, you only need 2.5 yards. Yes?
When you said, like, you go with the most extreme measurement, what, can you reiterate what you meant by that? Because I was sometimes there aren't very many sizes available. It's like, I don't know, should I try to learn how to alter them?
Learning how to alter them is going to help you a lot, but I would say wherever you need it to fit the best. So if you really need it, to fit across the bust, go off of the bust measurement first when you're buying your pattern, or whatever the biggest measurement is. If you have larger hips, go off of the hip measurement because it's easier to take patterns in than it is to let them out. Any other questions before we move on? Oh, in the back.
So I was looking at the sizing, and I know what I've always wondered this. So the sizing on a pattern doesn't necessarily follow dress size.
No, it definitely does not. Especially because a lot of dresses department stores are vanity sized, and yeah, so like a size 2 could actually be a size 4, in the store or whatever. But pattern sizes are really, really old. So this is size 10. Normally in the stores I'm like a size 0 or 2, but here I'm a size 10. So you really have to, know your measurements, and that's why I said I printed out the papers for it. And I'll show you. I think it's the next slide. Yeah. So these are the measurements that you should have either on hand, like on a Post-it note or something, or bring the whole thing to the store with you when you're buying a pattern. Whatever you need to do to make sure you get the right size. And like I said, I have a printout of this, except I think it's missing the top part, like this is cut off, like bust is cut off, and like hand is cut off. But all of these that show you how to measure everything, those are still on there. So I can hand those out after the panel. Any more questions? Leave this up for a second because I see people taking photos of it.
So what is sort of, I don't know, I mean, this is a fairly detailed diagram.
Yeah.
What would you say is the part of this diagram that people most often have trouble figuring out just from looking at the diagram?
Just from looking at the diagram, I think neck to waist is a really common measurement to kind of get confused about, which even on this is a little confusing. But usually for patterns, all you need is bust, waist, and hips. So out of those, waist is probably the most, not confusing, but has the most misconceptions about it. So when you're looking at patterns and sewing and stuff, your waist is wherever, basically wherever you're the smallest. And so it's not necessarily, your hip measurement, which like in everyday life, that's referred to as your waist sometimes. Your waist is actually way up higher. It's above your belly button. I've heard people say that your waist is your belly button. And maybe when you're buying pants it is, but when you're sewing, it's much higher. Yes?
I have a relatively long torso, I've been told. So, I mean, how are you supposed to deal with the fact that your waist is where you're smallest, but that might be a different height from, and then like that's going to affect when the dress has the waist at a certain distance from other parts?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's where these other measurements come in. So like your neck to waist, you said you have a long torso, right?
Yeah.
So your neck to waist measurement would need to be longer. And this is a whole, I don't want to get too much into altering patterns because I'm not very good at it. I do trial and error like a lot, which is why this isn't about altering patterns exactly. But yeah, basically that's what it is. You need your neck to waist measurement. When you transfer this to pattern, that's where you want to lengthen it. Yes?
I've been told that to measure your waist is where your oldest would go like short. Is that right?
I'll check.
For me to figure it out.
It's not wrong, but I can see like if you have a longer torso or a shorter torso, it might be a little bit different. So it's definitely wherever you're most indented. But yeah, I can see how that would work, leaning back and forth. Anything else? Alright, I'm gonna move on. Okay, so we just looked at some of the measurements, how to choose your size, and then this down below is just more. This is for like dress picture B and C. I don't think I copied those over like to blow up bigger, but it's the same thing. This is just how many yards of fabric you need for each dress. So again, you go by your measurement and then go just straight down. The next section, I don't remember. I don't have no parts, by the way, in case you didn't notice. Yes?
What about when you have more than one fabric?
Like different colors of fabric or different patterns?
Like a self and contrast.
Like what?
Self and contrast. Don't they list, don't you use more than one fabric in an outfit sometimes?
Yeah, I think that is this next part actually. I'm gonna check. It's not. Yeah, I think that's up where it talks about where it is. Can't read it. No, I have the actual pattern. What am I doing?
Does she mean different kinds of fabric just in general, or different kinds of fabric with the measurements of how much fabric you need?
Like if you have,
If you need different types of fabric for different probably tell you where it talks about what type of fabric to buy.
Yeah.
And from there you can get what you need.
It does. But if you're doing like a dress with sleeves or something and you want the sleeves to be a different color, sometimes dresses, or not dresses, patterns will tell you specifically like, oh, you need 1 yard for the sleeves and 1 yard or 2 yards for the body. Sometimes they'll tell you, but usually they'll just give you an overall estimation of how much fabric you'll need for the whole thing. Yeah, this pattern in particular, it does say, where it talks about the fabrics, it says extra fabric needed to match plaid, stripes, or one-way design fabrics. But it doesn't talk about different like colors or different patterns and stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, you would kind of have to guess.
Or open it.
Yeah, or open the entire
Yeah.
in the store. Or buy it, take it home, and open it there, and then measure it out. Yeah. This is the measurements of the actual dress. So if you want to know, if you want to know like where the dress is going to hit, like it says it's supposed to come to your knee, but if you're taller and it's going to come above your knee, this is going to tell you exactly how long it is or how wide it is. That's pretty much it. It's not too different from the body measurements that they listed earlier because this dress is kind of fitted. But it will tell you if you're making like, I have a pattern for a wizard's robe, that the measurements of the garment are way different than the body measurements because it's bigger and baggier. That's basically it. I honestly almost never use this section because I haven't had a need for it, but if you do need to know, it's there. Actual pattern pieces. So, any questions before I move on from the packaging? It's pretty straightforward. It's just a lot of stuff. Okay, so once you get your pattern, you picked out the right size and everything, the right style, you're gonna open it up and there's gonna be a whole bunch of different pieces inside. This one on the front actually tells me that there are, I thought I saw it. No, on the back. There's 6 different pieces, but each dress I think only uses 3 or 4 different pieces. So you're gonna need to figure out which pieces are for which outfit or which dress. Usually they'll have something like this inside where it shows you all the pieces. This one's a really simplified version too, which is kind of nice. It shows you all the pieces and it tells you what they're for. Like this one says piece number 6 is for the ruffle on dress A. Piece number 6 is like up here. There are other ways to tell them, and that's what I'm going to go over as well. I don't remember which one this is. I think this is a butter egg pattern. No. So this one actually tells you, oh no, this is the wizard robe. So this one actually tells you, it references the front of the packaging. So wizard robe A uses pieces 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the capelet for A or B uses pieces 5 and 6. And these pieces also have names. So when you open up the pattern, this is my next one? No, it's not. When you open up the pattern, it'll have a number on each pattern piece, and sometimes it'll say back, front, sleeve, tie, or whatever. I found that older patterns don't have this, but newer ones do. And by older, I mean like 70s, 80s, and like into the 90s. I get a lot of hand-me-down patterns. It's amazing. But newer ones will tell you what it's for. And this half is in Spanish. This is the simplicity pattern, a different one than the first one. This one tells you how to lay out the fabric, and I'm going to go over that in a second. But this one also tells you, dress or jumper A. So these are all the pieces you need for dress or jumper A. And then there's another section, I think it's like right here, below it, that tells you for B and for C as well. So yeah. Now yeah, and it does list, I know it's super blurry, that's why I couldn't say it. It tells you which pieces you need. So up above it says jumper A, and then right underneath it tells you what numbers you need. I see people taking pictures of them going around. This one's the butter pattern. And it says, write really big, skirt A, and then it says use pieces 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And there's a nice picture of the front. Yeah, front and back. This is a newer simplicity pattern, which I think is from like 2000 or like 2010, something like that. The first one I think is from like the 90s or early 2000s. So this is a newer simplicity pattern. So if you're going to the store and buying the pattern, you're more likely to see this than the first one. And it tells you, dress style A. Did I put it? Yeah. Use pieces 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
I have a question.
Yes.
In regards to whenever you receive one of these packages from like a Joanne or something, inside the package, is it going to be the fabric itself or is it measurements for the fabric?
No.
It's kind of like stencils for the fabric.
Okay.
So I can maybe open one up and show you. But basically it's stencils, and what you do with the patterns is, well, I've seen people do it different ways, but I do with the patterns is cut them out and pin them to my fabric and then cut around them. So it's, where we go. I know not everybody's going to be able to see this, but you're in the front, so that's convenient. So it looks like this, so it's kind of shaped like the way you want to cut your fabric.
Okay.
And it has a bunch of markings on it, and I'm going to go over what all the markings mean, but I wanted to start with the nails. I see pictures being taken. Okay. Oh. So the other way, and the slightly more complicated way, depending on how you work, it's called a Berta Easy, and just because it says easy doesn't mean it's easy. Yeah, it's for a jacket. This is not easy. I'll go over this later. But when you look at the actual pattern, it looks super complicated. But on the actual pattern pieces, they told you it had a number on it. This one actually says it's front, it has some translations, and it tells you it's for, this is a jacket, so it's for jacket styles A, B, C, D, and E. It even tells you how much to cut, if the seam allowance is included or not, and what pattern number it is.
Excuse me?
Yes?
For simplicity and buttering, do they usually, since you pretty much trace them or some stuff, do they usually include seam allowance?
Most patterns do, and they will tell you if they don't. They'll tell you there should be instruction booklets inside that look like these. They'll either tell you on this or they'll tell you on the actual pattern pieces. Sometimes it'll say somewhere on the packaging, but of course the ones I have don't, so I don't know where on the packaging that would be. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Anything else? I feel like I'm going really fast, and I don't want to overwhelm you guys with too much information too fast.
Grain lines. Tell us about grain lines.
Okay, grain lines. Super important, and I ignore them a lot of the time. But don't do as I say, not as I do. Because grain lines are super, super important. And this is why I really wish I had my bolts of fabric with me, so I could show you better what I mean. So, grain line, you want to line it up with the weave of the fabric. I had to think for a second. So when you have a bolt of fabric, let me see if I have something I can simulate a bolt of fabric. Pretend it's fabric. And it's rolled up, and you go to Joann's or whatever, and the fabric is on little cardboard pieces. So it's rolled up like this, and the cardboard is going this way through it. You unroll it like that. Not quite like that. A little cleaner than that. But you unroll it that way. Cardboard's going across. So the across back and forth is called the weft, and then up and down is the grain line or the weave. And the way that I learned to remember that when I took a costume construction class is the weft goes weft and white. And I know it's ridiculous, but you'll remember it. And then the weave is the other one. So you want the grain line to go up and down, line it up with the weave. So it's pretty simple, especially because usually when you have pattern, standing up and down, the grain line is usually it's the long way. So when you roll out your fabric, sometimes the only way it will fit is the long way. So it's pretty simple. Like I said, sometimes I ignore it. It's more important if your fabric has any kind of stretch to it, especially if it's a two-way stretch fabric, so it only stretches one way and not the other way. Then grain line is super important, because if you have all your grain lines going different ways, it'll stretch diagonally instead of stretching around you and stuff like that. So if you have stretchy fabric, you really need to pay attention. If you have fabric with a pattern or a design on it, then you want all your grain lines to be going the same way so your pattern will line up. Stuff like that. I'm trying to think of more examples off the top of my head. Any more questions about the grain line? Yes.
So the green line goes with the what?
It goes with the weave. It goes up and down. Yeah.
It doesn't help because here
I
we
know,
see the
here
grain
I
line
put it
going left and
sideways.
right, but don't
Hold on.
listen to
I'm gonna
that.
fix it. That's not how it goes. There we go. I fixed it.
The weft goes left and right, and the
Yeah.
weave goes up and down.
Weave goes up and down. And that's looking at, like I said, if you're holding the roll of fabric so that it's so trying to think of another way to explain it, because I know it's kind of complicated, especially after your fabric's already cut into a square, like you go and buy it and then you don't know which way did it go. Some ways that you can tell is the edges of the fabric that are on the sides. So like assuming grain lines going up and down, the edges of fabric on the sides, sometimes when you get the fabric cut, they'll look different than the rest of the fabric. They'll be thicker, they'll be folded over, so that the fabric doesn't unravel on the sides. So sometimes that's one way to tell, especially after you get your fabric home. I really wish I had my bolts of fabric, I'm an idiot. Any more questions about the grain line? Sample the whole time. So this one, this is one of the simplicity pieces from the pattern I was talking about earlier. And usually the grain line goes, like from head to toe. It can go other ways though, especially if you have like a collar or a piece that's rounded, it can go a whole bunch of different ways. But usually that's what it will look like. Place on fold. So you have your fabric, pretend it's fabric again. And if you see a place on fold line, you want to fold your fabric over like that, and then the place on fold, the arrows will be pointing toward this fold, and it's right up against the edge. And I think I have an example. Yeah. So you'll fold your fabric. If you want, you can pretend the white square is fabric, and then you would put the arrows right up against the edge, and that's so that when you cut it out and then you open the fabric, you have one big piece that the sides are mirrored. Yeah, this one's for, I think, like the front of a dress. So you want that to be all one piece instead of cutting two separate pieces and having the seam straight up the front. I see pictures while I'm waiting. Any questions about the place on fold? Usually, pattern pieces will have if they have a place on fold line, they'll also have the grain line. Almost every single pattern piece I've ever looked at, even this, has a grain line on it. Pseudo notches. I've actually seen triangles in specific used for a couple different things. So this is really where you're going to want to reference the little guidebooks that come with your pattern. But in all the patterns I have up here, which I have a huge stack of patterns, luckily triangles are all notches. So the first thing you need them for is you cut out notches on curved edges. So you literally cut into these notches. Usually, I personally do this because this is the way I was taught. I do it after I sew it together. So I'll have two pattern pieces and they'll both have notches on them. I'll sew them together and then cut the notches out. And it's so that when you turn the pattern right side out, or not the pattern, when you turn the fabric right side out, the fabric won't bunch up like around curves. So it's usually on sleeves. I've seen it on if you're doing a princess seam, which has curved seams in the front. If you have, anything that's curved pretty much usually has notches on it. I've also seen this pattern though, this exact same like triangle with a line on it. I've seen that used to match up the edges of patterns. So like if it was one triangle, you would match it up to another pattern piece that had one triangle on it. I saw a question.
If you're going into the pattern piece, then they're something around the curve. If you're going outside of the pattern piece, then they're matching.
Wait, what?
If they go outside of the pattern piece outline, they're matching.
Yes, thank you. So for anyone who can hear, because I know you're like way in the back, I'm going to flip one of these around. I can't. So yeah, what she said was if they're going, so assuming this line is the edge of the pattern, if the triangles are pointing inward, you cut them out, and if they're pointing outward, then that's telling you where to match up your pattern pieces. And I'll go into matching up pattern pieces in a second. Any questions about those? Okay. So this is more, I've seen dots and diamonds, and I actually had somebody online ask me about the dots, and I was like, I don't know because I never see them. But I found a pattern that has them. So what they are is, and I have so many examples. I'll show you in a second, but if, I'm trying to, do I have a picture? I don't have a picture. So if there's one dot on, like, let's say pattern piece number 1, and there's the same dot on pattern piece number 2, that's where those pattern pieces should meet. So after you cut out your fabric and you're lining them up to sew together, the dots should line up. I mean, the dots are on your pattern, not your fabric, but you can mark them if you need to. But those should match up. And the same thing with diamonds, which I've only seen one pattern so far that had diamonds on it. But circles, diamonds, and then triangles if they're pointing outward away from the main part of the pattern. Sorry, I'm really bad at explaining that. Any questions about those? Oh, yes?
Actually, more of a comment since you're mentioning the dots,
Mhm.
because I do some sewing.
Mhm.
I was just seeing what else I could pick up. So usually the dots, they make this a device, and it's one side is a pin, and the other, and then it has another side with a chalk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, you fit the two pieces together, and it'll actually also mark your fabric. So it's actually a way of marking on your fabric so you know which ones meet up.
That's really cool. I've never seen those, but now I need one.
I got one from my grandmother, and I don't know where she got it from.
Oh.
You can try Joanne, because she goes and gets a lot of sewing stuff there.
Hopefully, that sounds like something they would have, and I just never noticed because I had no idea what it was for. I've also seen, the dots are also used for lining up darts. So you'll have the two sides of a dart, which is kind of triangle shaped, and they'll both have, each side will have like little circles on it, and then when you fold the fabric to make the dart, the circle should line up. Cutting line. That's where you cut out the pattern. I don't know. I've seen cutting lines that are dotted, and I'll show you guys in a second. But usually they're a solid line. And what was I going to say about lines? Oh, lengthen or shorten lines. So if you want to make your garment longer, I left out a word, but you cut between the two lines and then make it longer. And if you want to make it shorter, there's a couple ways. I think my next one talks about it. I didn't. Making a pattern shorter should be easier, but sometimes isn't. You'll usually fold on one of the lines, and it'll have a second line up higher that you bring that fold up, and then you tape it and trim the sides so they match up. Okay, weird. Should say cut between these lines. Any questions about lengthen or shorten lines? Like I said, I have like actual examples later that I'll probably show it better, but I wanted to go over quick vocabulary. Dotted lines. This is usually what you sew on. So cut out your pattern, and they'll show like it'll be like seam allowances, it'll be darts. Since when you're sewing, you put your pattern away, you don't actually sew through the pattern, although some people do. It's fine. I see a question.
It was in regards to the cutting line.
Yes.
And you said you had seen some where they're dotted.
Yes.
I've seen it on multiple sizes.
Yeah.
patterns, Where they'll give you like a solid line for the small, and then
Yep.
a dotted line for the next size up, and then like maybe a longer dotted line.
Yeah, I have the Berta pattern that I have. It's the same way. And actually, the Berta pattern that I have, it's 4 different sizes. So like the outermost, I think is like the longer dotted line, and then the next one is a little bit shorter, and then the next one. So at the 4th one in, it's literally just like little stars in a line to show you where to cut out. But usually, dotted lines are what you actually sew on. I know it's really confusing. I wish all patterns just would like get together and agree on how to mark them. Yes?
Another thing, it sometimes it won't give you dotted lines.
Yeah.
For the seam allowance, it will tell you how big the seam allowance should be though. And usually, sewing machines, they'll have little.
Yeah, and your sewing machine should have little lines on it that you can line up the fabric, and it'll sew the right amount away. Yeah, there's not dotted lines on everything. Not for seam allowance anyway, but darts usually have dotted lines as well. Yes?
So I know you said the further part of your PowerPoint is going to be lengthening.
Yeah.
I'll just wait till then.
Okay. Yes.
There's a guard.
Of course it's the guy.
You have a point. So if you want part of your pattern to be curved, and the reason she says, of course, it's the guy, because you have to do this on the bust for girls, or sometimes they're on the hips. If you want the pattern to be, if you want the actual fabric of the garment to be curved, basically you take, oh, I have a dart right here. I don't know if you can see, I hope you can. These triangle lines. So you'll take the outer, the top, not the outermost, but you'll take the top and fold them together. And then it should come to a point down at the bottom. And basically, I don't know if you can see like on the pattern, but it makes it curve outward like that.
No offense meant, by the way. I just, you know.
Yeah, I think guys have to use it a little bit less. I think use it on suits as well to
Yeah.
make jackets fit inward. Yes? Okay. Okay, so now I have some actual examples. So this is a simplicity pattern. This is the older one. I wish they had copyright dates on them, but I think, oh, it does. This one's from 1995, so it's a little older than I thought it was. And you can see, it's not exact because I had to make this in Microsoft Paint. These are the lines that you would cut, you cut out on. This is, I do, okay, fancy. Okay, so for a size 20 dress, you cut out on the outermost line, size 18 is the middle one, and size 16 is the innermost one. And of course, those are going to vary depending on what size you buy. And I think on this one, the middle line is still exactly the same because it has a place on fold. We'll get to that in a second. It'll tell you what number it is, and sometimes it'll tell you what piece it is and what style it's for, usually. Like I said, newer ones do more often. Then it's kind of a zoom in sort of thing. So you have notches on the curve right here, but they're not, like I said, this isn't exact to what the pattern looks like, but it's kind of a general, these are the symbols. Yes?
When you're cutting, like going a size down, does that still include the seam allowance, or do you have to?
It should. If your pattern says include seam allowance, then yeah, even on the smallest size, seam allowance is still included. Okay. So these are the notches. They're facing inward, so you cut those out because so that when you attach the piece that fits right here, and you flip it outward like to wear it, the fabric won't bunch up in the, I think that's the armpit. It tells you how many pieces of this to cut. So because this is the back, well, it's the lining, but it's the back lining. So this is going to be a seam right up the back of the dress. You need to cut 2 pieces. This is the straight of grain line. And this is the lengthening or shortening line. So if somebody had a question about lengthening, what you do is you cut in between these 2 lines right here, the 2 solid lines. And then you basically just separate them however far you need, like however long you need to lengthen it. If it's like 2 inches, you just split it apart 2 inches. If it's, 4 inches, 6 inches, whatever, you just split it. And then you get a second piece of paper and tape it down and make sure the edges line up. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So then how do you deal with the fact that on the flat part, it'll obviously line up, but what about on the left there?
Yeah,
you just redraw the line?
Basically, yeah, you would just redraw the lines and connect them together. I understand what you're saying, though. I'm going to hazard a guess that if you're lengthening it one way, you're also going to need to, so this is the dress. So if you were lengthening it, you would probably just extend this bottom line to make it a little bit wider as well, which might change the fit of the dress a little bit, but it shouldn't, since this is a flared dress anyway, it shouldn't. You would just lengthen it and then, or I'm trying to think how to explain this without actually having to think. Separate it.
Because I've seen stuff like that before where I've thought about changing the size, but thinking about redrawing it and having no idea how that's going to change the dress or in the place in the end.
Yeah, I understand. I would continue the line. I don't know how to explain it. So if you're splitting it here, I would continue this line along the same slant or along the same curve, and just keep going. And if you probably would have to end up extending this the bottom a little bit, but just keep that line going. So if you are lengthening it, you might need some extra fabric, well, definitely fabric, but you might need some extra paper, not just for the part that you're lengthening, but also for the sides, because the sides might change. sense? Any questions? Okay. This is also the shortening line. So this pattern says that you fold either on one of these little solid lines or between them. It says like you can just choose. You fold it and then you bring it up to the dotted line. So this is not the right pattern. They're the right pattern, but I'm gonna see if I can show you how to do it. Actually, where is it? Yeah, I don't want to do that. So assuming this is your pattern, so pretend this is the shortening and lengthening lines. You fold them, that's gonna fall. One that way. And you're basically gonna make a pleat in the pattern. Up. And bring them up. Bring it. Like that. This is really short. Dang it. Pattern, work with me. I give up. We're gonna bring them up. Like that. So that the overall length is shorter. So it's folding on the solid lines and bringing it up to the dotted line. Does that make sense? I wish I had the actual piece. It's in here somewhere. Yeah, let's see. I had notes. There we go. This is the pattern I'm talking about. Yes?
So, was that only for the pattern to shorten it, or was that for the fabric too? Or do you shorten the pattern and cut out the fabric?
You would shorten the pattern and then cut out the fabric. But it would work the same way with the fabric. If you wanted to mark the lines on your fabric and do it that way, that would work too. Okay. This is the piece I've been holding up this entire time. This is a buttered pattern, and same thing, the outer lines are already cut. This one's a little bit different in that as they get smaller, the waist kind of gets higher, sort of? Oh yeah, because it wants to be the same length. So as the bottom is coming up, this is coming up as well. So instead of cutting all the way around, where's the thing? There we go. So instead of cutting like all the way around the outside, you would actually cut, if you're following this outer line, it's the inside line on the top. So usually they will be marked multiple places. So this one's marked on the side and on the side? Nope, it's not. It's marked on the side though. I don't know if you guys can see that, but the sizes are marked right here on the sides. And then shade of grain line as well, and how many to cut. How many to get better. Super complicated. This one uses diamonds to match up the edges. So this particular piece is a whole bunch. So what you would do is when you're looking at your pattern pieces, they should all have diamonds on them where they line up. No, that's just the middle part that we already looked at. So get that out of there so it looks less complicated. So what you would do when you're matching up your fabric and your pattern pieces and all that, trying to figure out which sides to sew, you want to find, like the two pieces that have a number 3 with 1 diamond on it, and those two sides match up. And the same, the 6 with the 1 diamond should match up. The 4, I think this is a skirt, so the waistband up on top has a 4 with the diamond, and the 3 diamonds with the 2 would match up to the other side. That actually matches up to itself. So you would be cutting 2 of this piece and then mirroring it, so you have a seam down the back. It says center back on it, which literally just means it's the center of the back. And this is the zipper, not that you could tell, but it looks a little bit better on the pattern than it does in my Microsoft Paint recreation. But it does have this straight line with a dot on the end and little triangles up the side. This pattern actually also uses the dots as stopping points. So like that's the stopping point for the zipper. And then these are the darts up top, and these are the stopping points of the darts. These darts are also, they move depending on what sides you cut out. So you want to mark, the dots that correspond to the sides. Not the dots. Mark the darts that correspond to the sides that you cut out. So if you cut out a make sure 16 piece, you're going to want to make sure that when you make the dart, it lines up with the one that's marked size 16. Make sense? Any questions? Yes.
Does the zipper, would that be like
Yeah, that would be at the edge. It would be in the wait. Before I say that, actually, let me check. Yeah, it would be in the seam, basically.
Okay.
More questions? Yes.
So when you're dealing with a dart, do you cut out on that dotted line, and then do you sew it together, or?
You actually don't cut out on the dotted line. You leave it as one piece, and then they have these nifty little tools, or you can do it with a pencil, I guess, where you leave the pattern on top of your fabric before you start sewing, and then there's I think it's like chalk almost. It's a paper with like a kind of chalky substance on top. You slide it between the pattern and the fabric with the chalky side down, and there's a wheel that kind of looks like one of those things that you cut pizzas with, except it has spikes on it. And you roll over these dotted lines with that, so that the dotted lines transfer to your fabric. Then you line up those dotted lines, and you sew on them. And what you do is you start at the top, or the edge rather, sew all the way down to the bottom, and then you let the strings hang off the end instead of back stitching or anything. And you tie them in a knot, and then you have to iron it, so that the fabric will basically be bunched up in that spot, and you don't cut the edge of it or anything. You just leave it folded inside.
So wait, do you sew them together like that?
Yeah, you basically join them together like that.
Okay.
So like yeah, I know it's kind of complicated to explain without actually doing it. But yeah, this is a good example of where dotted lines mean that you sew on the lines. Yes.
Just to clarify with the chalk base, you put the wrong side of the fabric facing the chalk side or the right side?
Or does it wash off when it's dry?
It washes off.
It does wash off. It's really a preference thing. I think I usually mark mine on the wrong side so that when I fold it over, I can see, because you want the seam on the wrong side of the fabric. So when you fold it over, you can see the lines on the outside. Wait, I didn't make this up. So I usually mark it on the wrong side of the fabric so that when I fold the fabric over to make the dart, I can still see where the lines are and I can make sure they're lined up. As opposed to if they're on the right side, you would be joining the lines together, but you can't double check if they're actually matched up.
So, is it the wrong side facing down on the chalk, or is it the right side facing down? I forget how it works. Yeah.
It would have to be the chalk paper on the wrong side so that it would transfer.
Yeah, so if you have the pattern in your fabric and you have the chalk piece in between, the chalky side, because there's like a chalky side and like a regular paper side, the chalky side should be facing towards your fabric. And then,
The wrong side of the fabric.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. No more questions? The darts are complicated, we're going all these tangents. Next one I have is a McCall's piece, and it's pants, but pretend it's shorts because I didn't feel like making it that long. And same thing. Oh, really? We only have 5 minutes. Okay.
Oh wow.
I'll kind of speed through this because it's a little bit of the same. So same thing, these are the lines you cut it out on. This is your straight of grain, this is what piece it is, and this is how many to cut. Yeah, those are the size. And these are where you match up your patterns. So you want to find the other pattern pieces that have the same mark. Those are the pieces numbered, and those are the pieces that line up. I really want to get to the next one because it looks really intimidating. This is the Berta, and this is actually, the brand is Berta Easy. But it doesn't look that easy at all. So this actually took me a while to figure out what to do. Can we go on the next one? Or, yeah, okay. So these are your pattern sizes, and this is a good example of the pattern sizes using dotted lines. And the way this one worked, yeah, there's it's a jacket, and there are, as you can see, A, B, C, D, and E styles of this jacket that this pattern can be used for. So what these multiple lines are if you want style C in size 18, then when you're cutting out the size 18, you cut on these lines. And if you wanted it in style A or D, you would use these lines, and B or E is these lines. Does that make sense? I know it looks super complicated, and I was staring at it like, why are some of these dotted, and why are some of these solid, and how come there's so many, and yeah, but I don't know why they use solid lines for A and D, because there's almost no reason, but I'm going to guess it's because these are both dotted, and then you need to differentiate between them. And then it has a whole bunch of lengthened and short lines. Oh no, there was. Okay, there isn't more. This one uses dots to line up the edges. And I'm trying to remember what these were, but apparently I didn't put what they were. Oh, God. So it uses dots to line up this part, but it uses lines, these little hang lines, to line up this part. So this is for it's a jacket, like I said, so this is for the collar. And so to line up the collar piece, you use the dots, so numbers 1 and 2. And then to line up the side, you use the lines instead of looking for dots. So you would find the other piece that has a 3 and these little lines instead of looking for dots or diamonds. Does that make sense? And that's the end. Actually, I have a bunch of patterns. If you guys want to do like one-on-one, we can go out in the hallway and I can get the actual pattern pieces and show you. And I also have patterns you can give away, different sizes.